we are watching the rebuttal given by the state of Tennessee in the criminal case against Travis Reinking. He's accused of a shooting massacre at a Nashville Waffle House back in 2018. His defense team has put forth a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. Is the jury convinced? These are the final arguments that they're going to hear. Let's go back in now, exactly where we left off.
Hiding out. It can be. Trying to disguise yourself. It can be. Describing your actions as evil. It can be. This is the testimony not of an unbiased person, but of an advocate. When she took that stand in this trial, she decided to become his advocate and not an unbiased witness. Perhaps in her other cases, she has not been so conflicted. But in this one, for whatever reason, it's clear from the evidence and the testimony that she was. Dr. Eisen, same questions. If you describe your actions as evil, are they an indicator of wrongfulness? Now, you ladies and gentlemen of this jury know that evil is as wrong as can be. And that's how he described his actions. And of course, Dr. Eisen reluctantly agrees that if you describe your actions as evil, then indeed you do understand that what you have done is wrong. But it was reluctant. Why is that? Perhaps she refuses to back down from the mistakes that she made in her evaluation, overlooking certain aspects of the reports that were given to her. Defense told you that three doctors at MTMHI signed off on her opinion. You only heard from one. I didn't see Dr. Feist walk in that door and testify and be subjected to cross-examination, or at the very least verify that that was his opinion. In fact, to the contrary, what you heard the testimony was that Dr. Feist worked out of a different location. There was no testimony that he actually met with Travis Reinking. That's not a supported opinion. Dr. Kovacs. Dr. Kovacs could have easily come in this courtroom for defense if they thought he was going to provide them with valuable testimony. Where was he? The only evidence that you heard about Dr. Kovacs is that when he was conducting the evaluation with Travis Reinking, he grew increasingly concerned that Travis Reinking had not committed this crime because he had been commanded by God, but because he was acting out of revenge, and therefore, at the time, wasn't certain that he could support the opinion that Dr. Eisen ultimately came to. So it's not three doctors. It's one doctor from MTMHI, Dr. Eisen. Dr. Eisen, who couldn't even tell you which reports and journals she reviewed. Dr. Eisen, who couldn't even tell you, she didn't even look at the video. Now, that was just yesterday, so I know you know how the state feels about that. But I want you to understand, how is it that you can give your expert opinion about someone's actions if you haven't even looked at the actions? When we ask them, well, you're an expert witness. You can sit in this courtroom. You could have watched the trial. They didn't even have to come to the courthouse. There's a camera right there. They could have cut it on while they were in their office doing their own business and listened to the testimony. They didn't even care enough to do that. Didn't even care enough to hear the testimony of the eyewitnesses. Uninterested in that. And yet, they have an expert opinion based on limited conversations with Travis Reinking, based on him saying that he had been commanded by God. Or was it self-defense? Or had he been baited by the FBI and the CIA into tricking him? Or was it the aliens? You know, there was also the thing where he's fighting in some war with the aliens. It can't be all of them. They're trying to say it's every single one of them. If you're acting out of self-defense, you don't need a command from God. James Shaw Jr. didn't tell you that he needed God to tell him to fight back. He told you that he saw Travis Reinking coming through that door, and at that moment, it was his time to fight back because it was going to be his life or Travis Reinking's. So he had to move him out the way. He didn't need a command from God. Travis Reinking didn't need a command from God. My question to you is, how is it that a man who is planned to commit an act, planned to kill people, tell you that the only reason he did so is because he was commanded? How is it that a man who has spent so much time writing and thinking about mass murder can tell you that the only reason that he committed a mass murder is because he was commanded to? God didn't have nothing to do with that. That was Travis Reinking, every single bit of it. God didn't tell him to take a Bushmaster XM15 assault rifle. He had 4 guns, 4 of them. He could have picked any one. Every single one of them guns would have killed people, but he didn't pick the other guns. He picked the gun that could inflict the most damage. He picked the gun that could shoot the most rapidly. He picked the gun that would shoot with high velocity and cause the bullets to act like they were exploding, leaving Sharita and Shantia with injuries consistent with having been in a military battle. But really, they were just at a Waffle House. He made those choices when he picked that gun. Defense says to you, well, he was naked, and a naked man can't disguise himself. You heard the testimony of the eyewitnesses. Kayla Shaw cowering in between the stools and the counter. What did she say to you? She looked up and all she could see was his naked private area. That's the thing that stole her attention. She never got to his face. James Shaw didn't say, I can identify Travis Reinking. He got in a fight with the man. What was the testimony? He gave a description: white man, blonde hair, naked. Not his face, because the nakedness distracts. Now, every plan, every criminal is not the world-class criminal you see in some movie that is doing a heist and never gets caught. Even some of the smartest people in America get caught. They're running Fortune 500 companies doing these schemes behind the scenes, and we never know, and they get caught and prosecuted and sent to prison. Travis Reinking is a person with delusions of grandeur. He thinks he's smarter than you. He believes he knows better than you. And so that he created a plan that still led to him getting caught does not absolve him of responsibility. He was very clear that it was his plan to go to the Waffle House. Very clear that it was his plan to kill as many people there. Very clear that it was his plan to get into his truck and leave. Very clear that he was going to go to another Waffle House and kill some more people. That was his plan. Very clear that he was going to commit mass murder. Self-defense. Against who? What you heard was that the only issue he may have even possibly had with people at Waffle House happened over some hash browns in Caryville, Tennessee, at some point, who knows when before. And yet, Joe Perez didn't work at the Waffle House. See, now, if you were to tell me that Travis Reinking walked past Joe Perez, walked around the corner, and killed some people, I would still have an immense problem with that. I might still be standing here, but I'd have a little less solid of an argument. That's not what he did. He killed Joe first. Killed him. Then after he killed Taurean, he walked in and never went to the area where the Waffle House employees were. He didn't go left. He went right. That was his choice. There's no question that DeEbony Groves and Sharita Henderson were not Waffle House employees as they cowered, hoping that they could play dead underneath that table. No doubt. And yet, he killed him anyways. What did Sharita say? She tried to play dead, and then she opened her eyes. And in a moment, she looked at him. How terrifying it must have been. How frightening it must have been to see this man standing over her, that big gun that had already killed people. And then he looked her dead in the eye and shot her. Not once, 3 times. This is a man who is evil. He knew what he was doing.
Did you hear the prosecutor very astutely ask, self-defense against who? He was saying he went on that shooting rampage because he was being attacked, harassed, his computer hacked, all of it delusions. Is it enough for him to be found not guilty by reason of legal insanity? You won't miss a moment of this rebuttal. We'll get you right back into the courtroom where we left off after this. Prosecutors say that Travis Reinking absolutely knew what he was doing when he went to that Waffle House at 3:30 in the morning back in 2018, killing 4 people, injuring 4 others. We're going to go back in right now, hear more of the state's rebuttal. So we heard the closing arguments, and now the state gets a chance to rebut. The prosecution always gets to go first and last in a criminal case.
He knew it was evil. And yet he comes to you and tells you he didn't know it was wrong. We have no burden to prove when it comes to the insanity defense. None. Defense says we should give you a motive. We don't have to give you a motive. We didn't have to put on any evidence, especially after the testimony of those doctors. We did put on some evidence because we've taken this case as serious as possible, because that's what it demands. The reality is, Travis Reinking decided that he wanted to punish people because his life was miserable, and misery loves company. So that's what he brought, misery and despair on that day. The reason that he wanted to exact that misery is because he had decided that his life had been so unfulfilling, unhappy. He wanted to make a change, move out west to Colorado, walk around and see the beautiful vistas, hang out with some friends, some actual friends. He said, enjoy the finer things in life. To me, nothing was better than doing a couple puffs of marijuana out at Glass Pipe or Loud and going for a long walk down the bike trail in Salida. That was my happy place, in the mountain air, surrounded by an incredible view of nature and feeling like you are witnessing it for the very first time in life. It was glorious. It's a dream. It's really what he wants. His life is not going well here. He doesn't like his job. He doesn't have any friends. He doesn't like himself. He's concerned that maybe he's struggling with his sexuality, struggling with whether or not he's even a man. or transsexual, and that makes him angry and agitated, and he acts out. He decided, I'm gonna act out, I'm gonna take a BMW, change my life. I'm gonna go out there. What does he say? I'm gonna take this BMW and I'm gonna live a good life. So he's gonna buy houses, or repossess them is his term. We know that's his term for theft, for stealing, carjacking. He's gonna live this great life out there, driving in nearly $100,000 car. And of course, because see, he thinks he's smarter than he is, that he's smarter than you, smarter than these doctors, and maybe he outsmarted them in this particular instance. Because he thinks he's smarter than you, he thought that he was gonna get away with it. It isn't because of the mental illness, it's because the man thinks that he's got delusions of grandeur. I mean, this is somebody who thinks that Taylor Swift and Ariana Grande are so interested in him. Not that they just want to have sex with him, but that they would want to rape him. Yeah, whatever. He's got a mental illness, but the mental illness is not the reason he did this. He wanted to go out there and change his life. And so when he came back home that night, from picking up his old truck that he obviously parked somewhere surreptitiously such that the police couldn't find it by the BMW dealership. When he got home and saw the police out there, he started to get angry. First thing he said was, he's tried to sneak into his apartment. Made sure he had his gun, just in case he needed to kill a couple cops, I guess. Snuck into his apartment, went upstairs, tells the doctors that he went up there and went to sleep, but was worried somebody might want to come talk to him. What he writes is that he has a rifle trained on them outside, as they're outside doing their job. Thankfully, former officer Caleb Andrews didn't go knock on his door. Wouldn't have been able to be here to testify. He said that over the next couple of days, he got angrier, yelled, screamed, mad. And so by the time we get to April 22nd, he's already well into formulating and carrying out his plan. Well into it. In reality, the plan started well before the BMW. April the 8th, he goes and gets 2 extra magazines. What do you need with 2 extra magazines? You've already got 1 magazine that carries 30 rounds. Why do you need 60 more at your ready? It's part of his plan. April 10th, he goes to get the silver bars. $1,700 worth of silver bars. Why? So he can make easy exchange without having to use a credit card or having to use a check. So you can walk into one of those coin and currency somewhere, lay down one of those silver bars, and get cash money from it. So he had cash money in his wallet, $400 and something. So he's making a plan. The BMW was part of the plan. He picks up the silver bars on the 20th. He's ready to go. He's got his go bag. He's got his water. Got his pistol. He's got his silver now.
What do all of those things say about Travis Reinking's mental state? The fact that he had the foresight to pack a bag, had with him silver bars, water, his Bible, another gun, lots more ammunition. We're going to have a forensic psychiatrist on the program today to talk about that and what it means. You won't miss a moment of this rebuttal, though. We just have to squeeze in a quick break. We'll be back with more after this. So glad to have you with us on this Friday afternoon here at Court TV. Welcome back. I'm Julie Grant. We're watching the rebuttal delivered by the state of Tennessee against Travis Reinking, accused in the massacre at that Tennessee Waffle House back in 2018. And one thing to think about, we know that he squeezed off 30 rounds of ammunition on that dreadful day, killing 4 people, injuring 4 others. His team doesn't dispute that he did the shooting. They dispute that he had the mental intent required under the law to be found guilty for the crimes. If I were this prosecutor, I would argue that 30 times with each trigger pull of that AR-15, he was making a decision to kill. Let's see what more the prosecutor says now.
And so now it's time to make a run somewhere else. But the car is taken. She learned that was a testimony, and he got upset. And so he drove to that Waffle House, angry, because he wanted to exact the same kind of pain and suffering that he felt on others. And if nothing else, anybody who wants to inflict pain and suffering, they know they are wrong. Plain and simple. I asked Dr. Wood, does he know what the term punishment means? Yes. He understands that punishment means to inflict suffering in retaliation. Yes. If you're acting in retaliation, then you understand that it is wrong. Yes. That was Dr. Wood's testimony. That means he knew he was wrong. Dr. Eisen, General Norman asked, if he knew he was acting in retaliation, then that means he knew he was wrong. Yes. So then he has an appreciation for his wrongfulness. Absolutely has an appreciation for his wrongfulness. These expert witnesses are not the final deciders in this case. You are. You can reject it altogether. Just throw it out. Act as if they didn't even come in here and testify. Honestly, that's what the rules say. You could accept some parts. Say, well, I believe he's got a mental illness. I saw the video. He's got a mental illness. But the rest of it, you don't have to take any of that. Throw it out. Based on their inability, unwillingness to do a meticulous and careful evaluation such that these victims deserved. I want you to recall that in Dr. Eisen's testimony, one of the things she didn't quite want to acknowledge is that she reviewed a journal in which he said he was writing a book in a way such that whoever read it would question his sanity. And he said that he wanted to get the book published before he started killing police officers, so that if they killed him, he would be a martyr. This is a man who is planning murder. He wants to carry out murder. You will read in his journal how he describes committing the murder, how he talks about it isn't how I thought it was going to be. Talks about how the blood was spraying in a way that he didn't expect or anticipate. Talks about how his skin was tingling. This is a man who knows right from wrong, completely and utterly understands it. Defense talked about the fact that a BMW sales lady said that he, in her brief interaction, may have reminded her of a friend. Well, you heard the testimony of several police officers, all of them who have been actually trained, not someone who has had an experience with one friend, trained experiences. They know how to interact with individuals who are experiencing symptoms of schizophrenia and know who they're supposed to call, know how they act to a person they testified that didn't happen with Travis Reinking. Not at all. Not one bit. These are the people who were interacting with him 34 hours after the shooting. Not one woman who had one experience with one friend. But they didn't want to highlight the fact that she said also in her testimony that he had moments of clarity. He was very clear. I'm taking this car. It's coming with me. He was very clear that if she didn't get out of that car, she too was coming with him. Thankfully, she did. Otherwise, who knows what could have happened. Maybe that baby bump she was rubbing in her testimony might not be with her. Defense said that choices are based on perception. What about Joe Perez Jr. could have forced him to perceive him in any way as a threat to him? He didn't describe Joe Perez Jr. as an alien.
We promise you won't miss a moment of this rebuttal. We're going to hear more about the aliens that this defendant thought were involved in his life. When we come back here on Court TV Live, these are the final arguments the jury's going to hear before they deliberate the fate of Travis Reinking. Was Travis Reinking insane at the time that he killed 4 people and injured 4 others? Let's go back into the courtroom and hear more of the state's rebuttal.
There's someone else in the alien army. That's not what he says. He called him a target. Why did he call him a target? Well, it wasn't just to dehumanize him. It's because he read or watched a video online in which he said the military say the easiest way to make it easier to kill people, it's not call them people, call them targets. That's understanding wrongfulness, right? If you're able to say, I'm going to kill somebody, but in order to make it easier for me to do it, I have to rob them not only of their life, but their humanity in the process. You understand that what you are doing is wrong. He knew it was wrong. You'll read his journal. He says that after he kills Joe and Taurean, as you see in the video, he casually steps over Joe's body as he's laying there on the ground. He says, well, gone this far. Might as well keep going. Keep killing people. That's somebody who understands that it is wrong. And that's the only standard that you have in here that you really need to consider, right? Is it clear and convincing that he didn't know what he was doing was wrong? Of course he did. Both the doctors essentially said it. They didn't want to completely walk back their testimony because they signed a report and didn't want to come across as unprofessional, I guess. But in reality, that was their testimony. He knew it was wrong. Defense says they have sympathy for the victims. I suppose words are an expression of sympathy, perhaps. But I can't tell that Travis Reinking has any sympathy for these people. How did he recreate it? He created these drawings on a styrofoam plates a year later. Drawing them as stick figures, targets again. He's dehumanizing them again. He's showing that he's killed them, which means he has an absolute appreciation of the nature of his conduct. And he's taking away their humanity, knowing that he killed people, which I submit to you is also an appreciation of his wrongfulness. Travis Reinking had a plan. He absolutely had a plan. And it was clear from the moment he walked into that, the moment he walked out of his apartment. See, there was a question as to why he might have a jacket on while he was naked. We already discussed why he was naked. Distracts. Why do you have a jacket? Well, if he's naked, he can't carry extra rounds. He needs pockets. See, that's part of his plan. But see, as he sat there with these 90 rounds, he had to fill them up. Had to fill it up. Joe Perez Jr. Taurean Sanderlin. Akilah Dasilva. Shantia Wagner. DeEbony Groves. Sharita Henderson. James Shaw Jr.
This is outstanding advocacy. Loading those cartridges into that clip and then naming the names of the victim doesn't get more powerful than that. You won't miss a moment of it. We're hitting the pause button. We'll take you back in there exactly where we're leaving off after this break.
Don't delay. Call now. 800-902-4921. Your acceptance is guaranteed. Make the call today. 800-902-4921. Call now.
Let's go back into the courtroom together now and hear more of the state of Tennessee's final arguments before this jury gets to deliberate Travis Reinking's fate. Reinking's sitting there in the courtroom, pretty emotionless. He's got his emotionless, excuse me, he's got his mouth hanging open, kind of just staring blankly. And where we left off, the prosecutor was delivering such powerful arguments and really being silent for much of it. He was taking cartridges and he was loading a clip and he was counting them and naming the names of all of the victims, all of the people who Travis Reinking shot on that dreadful day. Really powerful advocacy. Let's watch some more.
Well, he may have had another one for James Shaw Jr. That was his plan. As a famous boxer, Mike Tyson, you know him, probably heard the phrase, every man has a plan until he gets punched in the mouth. He wasn't ready for him. He didn't know who was behind that door. He expected that when he went behind that bathroom door, he was gonna have nothing but fish in a barrel, target practice, killing him. And behind that door was a man who was waiting to punch him in the mouth and disarm him and move him out of the way and get him out of that Waffle House and stop him from committing more murders at that Waffle House and the next Waffle House. That's what changed things. That's why he fled. He didn't flee because he wanted to. He fled because James Shaw moved him out the way. He pushed him out of there. He didn't think about that. And so as he went back to his apartment, which curiously was left unlocked, how else did he get in there, right? He took a shower. You saw James Shaw, he had blood on his hand, blood got on the gun, blood from his arms. What was he washing off? The blood. What's he do? He puts clothes on. He's no longer the naked man, now he's got clothes on. He puts his clothes on, he grabs his go bag, and he gets out of there. When? Dr. Eisen, when he heard the sirens, the police sirens that were coming for him in appreciation of wrongfulness. When did he get out of there? According to Dr. Wood, when he heard the sirens because they were coming for him in appreciation for wrongfulness. And what did he do? He hid for 34 hours. According to him, he hid underneath a house until some dog came sniffing around and heard and maybe thought he might get found. And according to him, he wanted to go hotwire a car and steal it to assist in his flee, his departure, his escape from justice. Didn't work out. Eventually he does get seen hiding out in the thick brush of the woods out there in an undeveloped portion of Antioch. And an officer walks up on him, and according to him, the first thing that he does, he finds some cover, Travis Reinking. He gives it some thought. He reaches like he's gonna reach for his gun. His gun is now in the backpack. He's just spent a day and a half underneath a house. Kind of hard to lay there with the gun on your hip. So it's not there anymore. He thinks about shooting that officer. Then he realizes, I'm caught. There's nothing I can do. And he submits. He's making an assessment about the value of his life, one that he didn't make about the value of the lives of these wonderful young people who were killed. And he continues to submit to these officers. Never once. You saw the officer Corman. She might not have been much taller than this, right? And she told you he was half a body taller than him. You've seen this man stand up. Look at these big guards in here. These are big, strong men. He's bigger than them. He didn't try to flee out of here, did he? Not once. You didn't see that. He didn't try to run from that cop as she gracefully guided him with one arm, because that's all that she had to do, right? He didn't try to run from, he didn't try to fight with the nurse as she forces a catheter up his urethra. Nothing. One of the corporals says, I was around him twice a week. Twice a week, never an issue. This is a man who now claims that these doctors now claim he's got this grand conspiracy that he's afraid of the state. But when the guys with the guns who are actual state agents come for him, nothing but compliance. Nothing. That's because he understands wrongfulness. He knew what he was doing. He knew that it was wrong. He knew when to act in a way where he needed to be compliant, and he knew when he could act in a way where he could just be the murderous man that he wanted to be. Ladies and gentlemen of this jury, as I mentioned to you earlier, you took an oath to be fair, to be just, to consider the facts of this case, to do what's right. The evidence in this case is clear. He committed the murders. It certainly isn't clear that he didn't appreciate the wrongfulness when he committed the murders. So if you're going to do what's right based on the evidence that was in this case, the only right verdict, the only just verdict is guilty. Any other verdict would be as wrong as Travis Reinking was on April 22nd, 2018.
All right, members of the jury, that concludes the closing.